Hi, the purpose of this video is to talk about limb lining on Lake Lanier. And limb lining can be a challenge on Lanier because the idea with limb lining is that you tie a string with a baited hook onto a tree branch that overhangs the water, and it needs to be in a good spot for catfish, and you leave it out overnight and the catfish comes along and bites it, and then you run your limb lines in the morning or the next day, and you get all the catfish that you caught.
There is a Redeemer, Jesus, God's own Son, precious Lamb of God, Messiah, Holy One.
On your limb lines. And what makes Lanier challenging for limb lining, more so than a lot of other places, is there just aren't that many tree branches that overhang the water in good spots and that meet all the conditions. And one of the conditions is that you need to be able to hang that bait down deep enough in the water for a fish to get it, but you don't want it to have so much slack in the resulting setup that it can get off into some structure and get tangled up. Because if you get a big fish on him but he gets it underwater because he's got too much room on that limb line and he gets it wrapped around something, a lot of time you're not going to end up getting that fish. So you need to pick a spot that both has fish nearby and that's also you're not going to get into structure. And a lot of the usable limbs on Lanier, they're just so close to structure that when I size them up, I'm like, big fish gets on that one, he's going to get wrapped up and get away. The other thing about a lot of the limbs overhanging the water on Lake Lanier is that they're so high off the water. They're 4 to 6 feet above the water level. And Lanier, as everybody knows, is very heavily trafficked, very heavily fished. So it's going to be obvious to everybody passing by that that's a limb line, and hey, maybe even that there's a fish on it. And my concern is that maybe some people out there might be messing with my limb lines, like they've occasionally, not often, but once in a while they mess with my jug lines. But it occurred to me lately, I was fishing in Flat Creek, and we were sitting there with a couple of buddies fishing right here, and they looked across the way and they saw a lot more docks in this area than they saw houses to go with them, and they also turned me on to another abandoned dock. So I started to think about abandoned docks as places to drop limb lines from, and because they meet all the criteria, right? Some of these abandoned docks, they're in pretty good places. They can be adjacent to deeper water, and times of year where you want to be adjacent to deep water. They're well out from the bank. They're close to the water, so it's very discreet to tie a limb line to the dock and get it down in the water. And a lot of them, they're in kind of open areas, so whereas the dock itself provides some structure to attract the fish, there's not a whole lot underneath those abandoned docks for the fish to get tied up in. On Friday, I was in this area here, and I'm just noticing lots of bait on the sonar out in 20 or 30 feet of water. And so I just guessed there were 3 or 4 abandoned docks up in here. I just guessed that when the sun goes down, the fish that are out in the middle hitting that bait now, they're going to go work the shoreline, and hung a few limb lines from the abandoned docks. And lo and behold, I had asked the Lord to open my eyes and show me where to put the limb lines. And I put some limb lines from some limbs in the area too. But I got skunked on the limb lines actually hanging from limbs. But on 3 limb lines hanging from the abandoned docks, we caught 4 of the catfish that you see pictured. So praise Jesus. So I'm going to be looking, as I fish the different areas, I'm going to have my eyes open for limbs that meet the conditions, but I'm also going to have my eyes open for abandoned docks. And don't get your knickers in a bunch making sure that the docks are abandoned. I just want to make sure that the dock is abandoned. It's not connected to the bank with a walkway. That's a hint. Most of them are in disrepair. A lot of them are in pretty poor shape. They're rusty. They're not displaying that Corps of Engineers permit that docks are supposed to have. And so don't worry, we're not hanging fishing lines from occupied docks that people are using and keeping up. These are abandoned docks, and as you look around, I'm kind of surprised now that my eyes are open to it. Somewhere between 5 and 10% of the docks out there, when you have a close look, they're abandoned. So good places to hang a few limb lines.
I tremble at the thought of Judgment Day. Lord, I am not ready. Please don't return just yet, for all my sins are put away. My cross is on the floor, and I would burn.